In a world full of power and politics, trust is a luxury that few can afford. But what happens when the world's biggest powers collide to kill one of their very own? This is the chilling tale of how Russia was murdered and the countries that conspired to pull it off. It was supposed to be a normal meeting with the heads of the world leaders. A rare moment of cooperation between the leaders of this world. A chance for the nations to come together to discuss their future. But what started as a high-stakes summit turned into a tragedy. Russia, one of the world leaders, one of the strongest countries in the world, and one of the most powerful, has been murdered. And the question remains, who did it? Why did they do it? And most importantly, how did they do it without anyone noticing that they pulled it off? The body was found in a locked room where Russia was found cold on the floor 5 minutes before the summit was meant to resume. The authorities were quick to investigate, but they noticed something very strange about this crime scene. There was no weapon. There was no sign of forced entry, and there was only a faint trail of blood leading out of the room. Enter Detective Australia. With years of experience handling high-profile cases, Australia was the man to figure out who murdered Russia. And instantly, Australia knew that this wasn't any old normal murder. This was to send a message. Australia wasted no time. They were a seasoned investigator. They checked the blood spatter. They checked for fingerprints. They checked for every possible part of this investigation. All they could think was, why did someone kill Russia and how did they do it? When all of a sudden, Australia noticed something. There actually was a sign of forced entry. The window was shattered. But there was no fingerprints, no signs of a struggle, and more importantly, not a drop of blood. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Australia rallied his troops and began to pick off suspects, and his 5 main suspects were as follows. The obvious suspect is of course the United States of America. Long at odds with Russia due to cyber attacks, the arms race and all-round political tension. Then there was Germany, a massive influence in Europe, also known as the heart of Europe, who had ties with Russia but were actually in some sort of a weird rivalry. Then there were China and India, 2 rising Asian superpowers, each with their own reasoning to want Russia out of the picture. And last but not least, we have Ukraine, for the obvious reasons, they're in a war. Australia dug deeper into every person's alibis, and this is what they noticed. Every single one of these suspects were at this summit at the time, and at the approximate time of the murder, all 5 of these countries went suddenly missing with not a single trace to be found. So Australia interviewed the United States of America, and what they noticed was the United States of America had a lot of holes in their story. Something was unusual with the United States of America. As Australia examined the United States of America, they also noticed that they had a bandage wrapped around his knuckles that looked like it had fresh blood all over it. They then interviewed Ukraine, and what was weird about Ukraine is they had the passcode to every locked room in the entire building. They set up this summit so they knew the ins and outs of every single room in this building. And Australia found this incredibly weird. Would this explain why there was no sign of real forced entry apart from the broken window? Did Ukraine enter Russia's room and take them by surprise, then murdering Russia, leaving them cold and lifeless on the floor? Ukraine has been wanting the demise of Russia for a while now, ever since the war has started. And was this the perfect opportunity to make that happen? This wasn't just about eliminating Russia. This was about getting their patriotism back. This was getting their country back. This is doing anything in their power to take control of their land once more. China was interviewed next, where they said that they saw Russia sneak into one of the rooms looking absolutely terrified. And then 10 seconds later they heard a scream. But at this point they didn't have an eye line on the door because they walked to their own room, so they didn't know if anyone entered or left that room. And China's alibi was actually airtight because what they found out was there was a camera. It shows China entering his room, locking the door and staying in there with no way of getting out. So China is no longer a suspect. Australia has cleared them. Germany was interviewed next, and they refused to say a single word. They lawyered up, said no comment to every single question, and didn't say a word throughout the 2-hour grueling interview. And then last but not least, India. India was interviewed, and India was told that they were seen with Russia about 30 seconds before the scream. India said this was true. But there was no way India could have done it because they were in the toilet at the time where Russia was murdered. But this is where Australia noticed something. He kept it to himself, but he realised India made a mistake. There was no way of getting into the toilet at this time because it was locked. By who? Ukraine. And I bet you're wondering, why would Ukraine do this? It's quite simple. They didn't like India and they just wanted to play a small little prank on them by not allowing them to go into the toilet. So India just lied to the detective. So that put Australia down to 4 suspects: Germany, the United States of America, Ukraine and India. All 4 countries' phones were taken, DNA was taken, and whereabouts was taken at the exact time of this murder. And as they went through the phones, they noticed something. The United States of America and Ukraine were talking back and forth for months on encrypted phone calls. They spoke in code, and the detective just couldn't figure it out, so they hired backup. The United Kingdom. As you know, the UK are fantastic at breaking codes, and that is exactly what they did. 4 months since this murder had happened, the United Kingdom finally cracked the code and figured out exactly the conversations between the United States of America and Ukraine. And the results they found were shocking. Germany and India were instantly let off the hook and no longer a suspect because the United States of America and Ukraine essentially confessed to the whole thing. Australia had these countries as their main 2 suspects all along, but ever since the recordings came out, it was just obvious. The conversations back and forth went as followed. On the day of the summit, we will take Russia down. Russia will be no more. This is the day. You will be free. These are just some of the comments given from the United States of America to Ukraine. America knew that Ukraine had all the codes to every single room. And with this, they'd also know where all the CCTV cameras would be. So, 10 minutes before the summit was meant to reschedule, Ukraine let the United States of America into Russia's room. And as America entered the room, Russia was all but aware. And America stabbed him with an M99 tranquilizer, leaving him paralyzed on the floor. America then put a pillow over Russia's face and smothered him to death. Once it was all said and done, he wanted to make it look like there was some sort of a break-in, so he smashed the window with a bandage wrapped around his hand. They then left the room, locked the room, and went back to the summit, and then crossed India on the way back, giving them a valid alibi. This alibi nearly cost India their freedom because they also lied to the detective, which is not what you want to do in a case like this. But why? Why would they do this? Well, it's simple. America wanted to be the most powerful country in the world, so they took over Russia's land and killed them. But they couldn't do it alone, so they needed the help of Ukraine. Ukraine's reasoning was simple. They're in a war. They don't want to be in a war, and they want their country back. So it's the perfect partnership for a devilish crime. So all that they had to do now was arrest America and Ukraine. But how could they? They're the most powerful countries in the world now. So Ukraine and America literally got away with murder. Australia showed up to both of their dorm rooms, tried to arrest them, and got shunned away. There's nothing anybody can do. Ukraine has got his land back, America has invaded Russia, and they can't do anything about it because they're the most powerful countries in the world. NATO did nothing about it because they were too scared, and BRICS were likewise. So that leaves a dead Russia, a more powerful America, and a free Ukraine. The perfect crime. And that's it. That's how America and Ukraine got away with murder. If you want more videos like this, let me know in the comments down below. It's been a pleasure. Bye.